Right, so what could possibly go wrong with deciding to hire a 47-year-old boat that had been left to fester at a cost of £6 million to the public purse per day, that we then had to also pay to refit, but refit it so it can take twice as many people as it was originally intended for? Well, welcome back to the Bibby Stockholm again, folks, the prison barge now moored off the Dorset Coast that now looks as though it'll never be fit for purpose, that was intended to hold 222 people, now set to house, according to government documentation, 506. Sardines isn't quite the word, is it? Think about it. This barge gets retrofitted to have more people to literally just fit on it, but you can't physically make the barge bigger to accommodate more space for said people. The corridors will be the same size. The communal areas will be the same size. The rooms and doorways are the same size. They've just fitted bunks into single rooms and the like. Functionally, when the thing was dry docked in Falmouth, it was a tidying up job, a patch up and a cram as many people in as we can mission. Now it's turned up in Dorset, on the Dorset Coast, and the shortcomings from a plain and simple safety perspective have been exposed as the Health and Safety Inspectorate and Fire Service are finding nothing but problems, and without their approval, their sign-off, people cannot be sent there. And that's a bit of a problem for Braverman and Co, when letters to the first 40 inmates have already been sent out, telling them they're going to the Bibby Stockholm, which have all now had to be delayed. They literally have tried to put people on the barge without it having passed its final checks. How nice of them. £6 million a day this is costing us. As I said, it's worth continuing to repeat as I go through this, because just keep thinking about it. £6 million a day this bloody thing is costing. As I mentioned in another video, the saving being made by transferring all these people to this boat from hotels amounts to just £5,000 a day, which when compared to that £6 million a day bill is nothing at all. And therefore any delays, any whatsoever, and it had already had to stay in Falmouth longer than intended, such was the level of works involved, that this thing can only now be costing the public purse more money. We can't possibly be saving any, and any further delays are just aggravating that all the more. The reasons for the delays are sound, and the fact they may well be unfixable were borne out when Tory sacrificial lamb from the Home Office, Ric Holden, got sent out to explain to Sky News about the delays, saying the barge was going through final checks to make sure it was safe, but couldn't put a time frame on exactly how long that would take to be done. Potentially, therefore, this thing has been one gigantic money pit then. So what are the problems with it then, Damo? Well, we don't know them all. Dorset and Wiltshire Fire Service hasn't given a detailed breakdown of their assessment, but the fact the barge has been described as a floating Grenfell doesn't inspire a very safe place to be accommodated. When you build a ship to cater for 222 people and you build it over 3 levels, you can imagine in the event of an emergency, let's consider an emergency situation here, say it's caught fire, the corridors are meant to deal with some 75 people per level. Now it's been retrofitted to take 506 people, maximum capacity, let's say it's full. Those same corridors, those same sized corridors, will now be expected to cope with 170 people per level. Can you spot the safety problem here? Seems rather obvious to me. Now combine that with the assessment made by a local town councillor who had visited, who said he wouldn't want to be on the vessel in the event of an incident, saw a few signs saying fire exit, but didn't see many actual fire escapes, and it becomes all the more dodgy looking, doesn't it? Although the local fire service hasn't weighed in detail themselves, their trade union, the FBU, have, which is rather notable, since they don't typically weigh in on the normal course of their members' duties, such as fire risk assessment. They're writing to the Home Office, no less, over this, to Braverman herself, accusing her and her department of attempting to house asylum seekers on a potential death trap. Their words. During these risk assessments, there are criteria on how wide corridors must be, for instance, on width of doorways, numbers of adequate escape routes. The vessel, despite the refit, is overcrowded on paper. It was never designed to hold so many people and has been made to try. But you can't magically make the thing bigger and therefore safe. Access to fire exits is also an issue. There aren't enough life jackets for everyone on board. So full-on Titanic scenario stuff now. It might be moored on the dockside, but how many people might be put on this thing that can't swim? I can't imagine the Home Office are checking. It's basic stuff. And the gates, oh, wait for this one. The gates on board the vessel leading to the exits are kept locked. So what can we describe that as in the event of a fire emergency? Should we call it a floating Hillsborough as well as a Grenfell and a Titanic at this point? You know, it wasn't until I read into this latest issue that I realised there are actually only two ways on and off this vessel. Those adequate escape routes that risk assessments take in. So assuming the corridors, which may have also failed the risk assessment in and of themselves, being no wider than elsewhere, leading to the off-ramps, that's 250 people potentially cramming through each of them. Now, I don't know how many of you might have been up and down a gangway on board a vessel of this sort or not. As someone who used to work in ship repair, I've been up and down plenty of them. And the thought of 250 people trying to get off them in a panic all at once due to fire or some such, will they opt to jump into the water instead, perhaps? Will they be one of the lucky ones to have a life jacket if they do? Picture people cramming down those gangways in such numbers. It sends a chill down my spine. The muster point in the event of an incident is also apparently too small to hold all 500 or so residents should the boat be filled to capacity. So who gets pushed into the water at the bottom then? You have to bear in mind that imagine the scenario that this thing does have some sort of disaster befall it, a fire or whatever, does become this floating Grenfell, for instance. You have all these people searching, trying to get off this barge. How do you get firefighters on to deal with the blaze then? People cannot get off safely. The risk to firefighters trying to get on becomes arguably too great in turn. All factors into the risk assessment. The only way the Bibby can become safe and usable is if the Home Office accepts they simply cannot put so many people on board this ship. More people than it was ever intended to hold. But of course, doing that makes the whole thing no longer cost effective. When we were only saving £5 grand off a £6 million daily charge over keeping asylum seekers in hotels, to have the number using the barge and make the Bibby a safe alternative to hotels will end up costing some £3 million a day, you would imagine then. That's what the math says. More than just leaving them in the hotels, making the entire affair an expensive piece of hardline anti-migrant stupidity from a racist government fixated on attacking minorities for headlines. What they should be doing is dealing with the backlog of asylum cases. What they should be doing is renegotiating a returns policy with the EU so we needn't keep all these people here. If their applications for asylum fail, send them back home, instead of letting this backlog grow, costing us all more, being cruel idiots as they are along the way, fixated on deporting people to Rwanda instead. The boat isn't fit for purpose. Another massive Tory failure, and Braverman balls up. She has to go, along with this entire depraved and shoddy government. They are incapable of doing what needs to be done. And if you need to underline that, the Home Office is sticking to the line that there are no fire safety issues, because of course they are. And Braverman herself is refusing to lower the numbers of people she plans to put on that barge in spite of the warnings being handed out. She is a monster, and I can't help thinking, with all the rhetoric against asylum seekers and migrants, if all this knowledge about the fire safety issues on board this boat go unheeded, will it become a target for attacks, as we've seen against hotels? And if so, will the fire brigade's warnings come to pass? It'll be so much for lessons learned after Grenfell, wouldn't it? And the hatred that will have been stoked up leading to such an incident. I can't help but think the barge will become a target for racists, will have been driven by this government and their rhetoric, and people like Braverman herself. In my view, she's a danger to these people. The whole Tory government is. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the video useful. Please like, share, and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where Braverman's depravity to those in hotels has been on show. Malnutrition in kids, all to save £3. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.